Welcome back to Top Shelf EDU. I'm your host, Aaron Lee. Today, I'm joined by Thomas Day, an International Recruitment Manager at Newcastle University. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited about our conversation today. So, for students and families who may not be too familiar with Newcastle, how would you describe the university and what makes it stand out compared to other institutions?
So we're like a mid to larger size institution. So we have 28,000 students, give or take, across our undergraduate and postgraduate programs. We are definitely we're a city-based institution, but we still have a campus. So we kind of still feel like you're on a university campus when you're in this when you're at the university, but we are very much in a city, and that's very much makes up part of the student experience. It's not just the university, but it's also the life that the students experience whilst they live in the city. And that's definitely, I think, one of the factors that I noticed does draw a lot of the students to us when they're comparing us to other universities in kind of the region that they may also be considering, is that closeness, that proximity that we do have with the city centre. You really do get the best of both worlds. We have a beautiful campus that we've got buildings from the 1800s, and you walk around and you're just amongst other students, and then you cross over one road and you're very much in the downtown. You don't kind of have to compromise when it comes to choosing campus or city, which I think some other institutions maybe you do. And I do think that is something that draws a lot of the students to us, and actually is one of the reasons why I chose to study there when I was an undergraduate student as well. But we cater to quite a wide variety of students from various different backgrounds and nationalities. We've got probably over 120 nationalities of students on campus, and we offer a real breadth of programs. So students come for lots of different subjects rather than dominating in one particular subject field.
Okay, thanks for that. How would you describe the academic culture in the student experience at Newcastle, and what types of students tend to thrive there?
So we are a Russell Group institution, which, if your listeners are not familiar with the Russell Group, is a group of leading research intensive institutions in the UK. And so there's 24 of them. We were one of the founding members, alongside places like Oxford and Cambridge and Edinburgh, Glasgow, those well-known research institutions. And so that definitely attracts students because of that strong reputation, that academic integrity, and we are world leading in a number of fields, and we have academics who are at the top of their field in certain areas. So that's definitely something that attracts um, students to the university. But I wouldn't say everybody is drawn purely for that reason, and that everybody who comes is looking to do a PhD in their subject. We definitely have students who come because of the city, who come because of the program that we maybe offer, who come because of the location. Sort of generally, we are an affordable place to live, which a lot of students like. That their money goes a lot further when they're here as a student. So it's a little bit of a mixture, but we are on the more selective end of the scale when it comes to our admissions process. Our grades that are required for some of our subjects are going to be higher than other universities. I wouldn't say we're in the most elite group and that we're very, very selective, but we are certainly, big, with us being in the Russell Group, it does set us in that sort of higher category when it comes to our academic profile.
Okay, thank you. And can you provide an overview of, what types of programs, either, the most popular or even some unique ones that students should know about? And is there any flexibility to explore courses outside of their chosen program?
So we have about 200 undergraduate degrees to choose from. We have three faculties. So we have humanities and social sciences, which is our largest faculty, which also includes our business school. We have our faculty of science, agriculture, and engineering, and we have a faculty of medical sciences. The university started as a medical school in 1834, so we are probably most well known for our medical science programs, and we offer direct entry from high school into medicine, and we also offer a graduate entry medicine program as well. So that 5 and 4 years respectively. But we do have other programs like sport and exercise science, for example. So we were one of the first universities to teach that from within a medical school specifically. And it is a academically rigorous program. It does sort of have a crossover with our medical programs, as well as having professionals who teach on the program. So the team doctor for Newcastle United Football Club, the Premiership Football Club, helped design the program and still teaches on it, for example. We also have pharmacy programs, and then we have other programs that are related to medicine. So we also have a dentistry program, and then biomed, bioscience. In our other faculties, we've got a really wide range of engineering programs. Newcastle was a very industrial city at one time, was very important in the Industrial Revolution. But particularly, we've got marine engineering, which I don't think you see at many universities. And most recently, we've introduced aerospace engineering as well. So that's due to start this September. But strangely, for a city-based university, one of our highest ranked programs is actually agriculture, which you probably wouldn't expect. But we do have two commercial farms that we own and operate, that are out of the city, and through that, we've got a really good reputation for like agriculture and land management programs. Where we are located in the northeast, we're actually, pretty much surrounded by countryside. Although we are a sizable city, there's pretty much nothing else in the northeast. So a lot of people who become because they do live in those regions and they do want to learn about land and agricultural management. And then in our faculty of humanities and social sciences, we have a number of programs that are popular for Canadians and American students and students from all around the world. Things like our direct entry law program, our business school is very popular. We have economics, we have accounting, we have finance, we have marketing, we have management programs. And then to discuss your point around sort of flexibility, we have a program called Combined Honours, which allows students to choose 2 or 3 subjects from a list of 20 that are within the humanities, and combine them into one. So it does give you a bit more mixture than you might find at some other institutions. You have to, if you pick the 3 in your first year, if you don't like one of them at the end of the first year, you can drop it and just go down to 2, or you can maintain 3 throughout your degree if you like. But it's a bit more flexible than your standard UK degree, where you might only have 1, possibly 2 subjects, but that subject pairing is normally chosen for you rather than you being able to combine it yourself. Most other programs, you're not really going to be able to take much outside of your main study area. You might be able to get one or two what we'd call modules a year where you are allowed to study outside of your subject area, but that's not that common. And Newcastle is not unique in that that's a kind of pretty common thing in the UK. Because of the degree structure that we have, that ensures you are mostly going to guarantee to graduate on time. The downside of that is that you are often a little bit more rigid and structured in terms of what you can choose to take. But our combined honours program is definitely good for somebody who knows they want something within the humanities, but maybe isn't able to decide exactly, what they would like to study. And then currently the highest ranked program is actually our geography program. I think we're in the world top 25 for that, which is not normally a program that a lot of students from North America consider, because I think geography is often associated with just physical geography, but actually geography at Newcastle sits in our humanities faculty. It's in the School of Geography, Politics and Sociology, so it's really broad in what it looks at. There is some physical element, but a lot of human geography involved, a lot of politics, a lot of international relations, a lot of economics. So for somebody who is interested in that, it's a really good program, and we have a very good reputation in that subject specifically.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a lot of information and a lot of
Yeah.
great detail for all of our listeners. So they have lots to choose from.
Yeah,
Definitely.
basically that's the thing. There's a lot for them to choose from. Yeah, probably one of the standout programs we don't have is veterinary science, but we do have really good animal science programs, which for students who don't get onto a vet science program can do animal science, as a really good pre-vet type option, to then prepare them for being able to do vet school at graduate level. But pretty much everything else, I think we've probably got to offer.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, you touched on research earlier in terms of being a research institution. What other types of teaching environment should students expect if they start at Newcastle? Is it lectures, tutorials? Are there opportunities for co-ops or internships or, study abroad? And when can they start doing some of those opportunities if available?
So first year is going to, well, across all 3 years, you're going to have a mixture of lectures and seminars, we would call them. So, depending on the program you study, your lectures may have 300 students at a time. Other programs won't be as popular and won't be as big, so they'll have even the lecture environment still won't have a huge number of students. But no matter what you study, those lectures are always going to be followed up by some kind of smaller group teaching experience where there's going to be a maximum of 25 students in the seminar, and if you're on a smaller program, it might only be 5 or 10 students in the seminar. Those seminars as well are often going to be led by the same people who taught the lecture as well, so people who are PhD plus type educated, potentially the ones who even wrote the textbooks that you're reading. And it's going to be much more interactive, a lot more asking questions of you and debate and discussion. And that's something that you would see in year one and year two and year three of your degree. When it comes to things like co-ops or internships, study abroad, generally across the university, across most programs, there is the option to do what we would call a placement year, which is where you actually do a full year of working. That's normally happens after your second year, before your third year. So you would go and work somewhere for a full year. You wouldn't pay full tuition whilst you're doing that, though. You would pay us an administration fee to remain as a student at the university, but it's not much money, probably less than 2,000 US dollars. But it is important to say that although we structure administratively the option to do that, those are competitive placements. So you have to find a job and get employed. We can't guarantee that you will get one of those. Our career service will certainly help students to do that, but it's not something we can guarantee that every student will be able to find that position, because those are paid positions that students do as well. Some programs will have shorter internships that the students can do. So they might happen during the term time or outside of term time during the holidays, but that depends on the program. And then when it comes to other shorter visits, site visits, or company engagement, again, it depends on the program, but there is a big focus right across university to give students as many opportunities to get work experience before they graduate. So that is something that is quite common across programs. Study abroad, again, generally, if students are looking to do that, it's going to be a full year where they would do it between their second and their third year. Often students choose, between study abroad or a placement. But we do only offer students exchange opportunities. So any of those study abroad opportunities that we offer, they're not going to cost students to do that. It's again, they pay us that administration fee, and then they would go and study at one of our partner institutions and not have to pay tuition at that university. So we have partners all around the world. The most popular destinations for students are the US, Canada, Australia, and then depending on whether or not they offer them in either English or they can speak the local language, we have a lot of partners in Europe as well. Then again, there are some shorter opportunities to go abroad on certain programs. So even though students who are studying medicine, for example, do that as well. And then we offer some 2 or 3 week opportunities during the summer, for example, for students to be able to go abroad. Other programs, some do have a semester long option when it comes to study abroad, but that's not something that every program would offer. It just depends on the particular program that the students are looking to do. So we have really high uptake in terms of the numbers of students who go abroad out of the Russell Group. I think we are one of the leading institutions to have students actually take up those opportunities. And placements are definitely becoming more popular for students to do. And we do see that students who do those often are then able to secure graduate offers at the end of them for when they've graduated. And even if not, they do often find that they are then able to use it when applying for graduate jobs at other industries to prove that they have got that experience. And interestingly, it also helps them academically as well. Students who do placement years often perform better in their final year compared to students who haven't done a placement year. So it's just great all around, both for your academics and for your job prospects as well. So really do encourage students to look at those and take up those opportunities where they can, particularly, given that it's not going to cost you particularly any more money. And actually, if you're earning your salary for a year, it might even give you money to then spend when you come back to university for your final year.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. And as you mentioned, when you have those opportunities, you're building those skills, you're building those experiences, not only if you're applying to grad school, but when you come out and you're entering the workforce as well. And in terms of how you said that they generally do better in their final year, I would think it's because they're putting all of their knowledge into practical use and they're seeing how it relates to the real world instead of just learning it into a classroom and talking about it. They're seeing how it actually transfers into the real world. So thank you for that. We're going to move on now. In terms of, when they are applying, how does the university leverage alumni networks for students and support? And a recent graduate, how would they kind of enter the workforce with support of the university?
So our alumni networks, we have alumni all around the world. Our biggest base is Newcastle itself, and then London is the second largest location that we have. But even in Canada and in North America, we have groups of alumni in a number of different cities. So and a lot of them are really keen to be able to give back to students who are applying from their city or their country. And if any students ever want to try and engage with alumni, our advancement team will do their best to do that and to help them find somebody. LinkedIn is obviously a very good way of being able to do that as well. And sometimes, I find out we've got some really impressive alumni that I've personally never engaged with in various locations. I remember one year finding out that the CEO of Aviva Canada, very large insurance firm, is a Newcastle graduate, for example. So we've got some great alumni all around the world. And that would be our advancement team who would help connect students and graduates with other alumni. And then our careers team itself, they do a lot of work that is open to students to engage with as soon as they start their studies. They could go along to an event before they've even taken a single class. And we really do encourage students to engage with our careers team from, the moment they arrive on campus, because it makes them aware of opportunities that they might otherwise miss that can be really helpful in helping them find graduate jobs, but also internships or even just part-time work whilst they're on campus. And then students are free to use our career service up to 3 years after graduation. So even once they have graduated and they maybe are no longer living in Newcastle, they can still use the service. They can have virtual support. They can get CV writing skills, interview prep, whatever it might be that they need, that is on offer to them for 3 years after they've graduated. We also have a lot of help for students who are interested in starting their own business. So we have a scheme called Startup, and it's actually one of the most successful in the UK. So I think we're ranked fourth in the UK currently, based on the turnover of our student and graduate led businesses. So we have a lot of companies that have started through that scheme who've gone on to become quite successful afterwards. Probably the most successful one in the past few years is a company called Castor, who make athleisure and sporting clothing. They work with a lot of professional teams and professional athletes. And one of the students, one of the guys who set that company up was a student at Newcastle. Interestingly, I think he was taking geography actually as well. So there you go, another plug for the geography program. And that company is now worth, I think, about $1.5 billion US, give or take. So they've done very, very well. But we've got a number of other smaller companies that are still thriving. And the people who run those companies still live locally. So, they come back in, they'll do sessions for students, they'll network with current students, they'll give advice and support. And we just recently redeveloped our career service area, and there's now space in that for students who are running their own business to be able to come and work from that location as well. So they don't even need to rent their own offices. They can come and do that in the career service themselves. So and get the support of the careers team who are around them as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for all of that. And the fact that you offer that service for 3 years after graduation that's impressive because not many schools do that. They may help with 1 year or a few months after, but for 3 years, that's really interesting, but also very supportive to all of your students and graduates.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't engage with the career service that much when I was a student, but did use them after. So I'm really glad that it is available to you after graduation, because it really helped me. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I first graduated. So I think that's probably why I hadn't engaged with them, because I wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do. And it took me about 18 months or so to figure out what it was I I wanted to do, or I thought I wanted to do, because it isn't actually what I'm doing now. But when I did engage with them, they were really helpful, and essentially it very much helped me to then secure a graduate scheme job. So I'm definitely glad that it is something that's available, because without them, I might not have been able to do that.
Yeah, and, when you said it took you 18 months, it took me probably 10 years after I graduated.
Well, I still don't know really what I want to do when I grow up. Like, I'm doing this job right now, I enjoy it, but I still don't feel like, I've grown up properly yet. So.
I hear you. We're going to move into admissions, if we can. And can you walk us through the undergraduate admissions process at Newcastle? And outside of the grades, because we know that grades are going to be first and foremost important. It doesn't matter where you apply, but how important are the personal statement, because all students will have to write a personal statement, as well as the academic reference? Can you just outline kind of, are they taken into consideration? And if so, are they for certain programs, or is grades going to be the first and end all?
So we obviously follow, the UCAS process for as all of the UK universities do. So it's worth pointing out, we do have those dentistry and medicine programs that have that early October deadline. So it's important for anybody who's considering applying to those to remember that. We're very much going to be led by grades in terms of our admissions decision, but I think there are going to be times when the personal statement and the reference do come into play. And I can't ever tell a student, oh, it doesn't matter about your personal statement, because it always can. So whilst it's not necessarily going to be every single application, it could be your application, and so therefore it's important that students still take their time to write a good personal statement, and that the person that they get to write a reference knows what needs to go into that reference as well. I also always say, the personal statement is also a great exercise for a student, because it forces you to write, why do you want to study this program? And I think if you're struggling to answer that question, maybe you should question about whether or not that's the right program for you. So even if it never gets looked at, it still is helpful for students just to be sure that what they're applying to is what they genuinely want to study for the next 3 years of their life, particularly, given that the UK system doesn't really allow you to change what you are studying. Once you're in, you're sort of locked in, and that's what you're going to be doing until you graduate. We will, personal statements will definitely become more helpful, and references as well, when maybe a student is a bit of a borderline student. So, if maybe their achieved or their predicted grades are maybe a couple of percent below, or, one grade below what we might normally look for, a really strong personal statement and a really good reference might help us to, be persuaded to make an offer to that student. Or if there are programs where they are particularly popular, then, if we have 20 students vying for one spot and they all have the same grades, then that's when a personal statement and a reference will become helpful to help us decide, which student we should be making the offer to. That's not going to be super common across most of our programs, but there may be some where that is something that students do need to be prepared for. Alongside those two elements of the application and the grades, we have some programs where there is an additional element. So medicine, dentistry, you need to take the UCAT test. Law, we don't require LNAT, so there's nothing additional for law at Newcastle for us. Pharmacy is required now for students to do an interview. That's something that I believe all pharmacy programs have to do now. Architecture, which is another one of our popular programs, we are required for a lot of students to submit a portfolio. Not everybody. If students are doing something in grade 12 or AP that is an art-based program, they might not be required to do one. But if they're not doing that, then they will be. And then there's a couple of other programs where there might be an interview as well, or performance required, like music, for example. So there are some programs that will have an additional element on top of the standard UCAS application, that will also be very important. And, in the case of something like medicine and UCAT, it's actually going to be very cutthroat in how they use that score. And if even if you've got amazing grades, even if they're achieved grades, maybe you're applying after you've graduated high school, but you don't have the right UCAT score, then unfortunately it's end game at that point. You're not going to be invited to interview, because we do have a 3-stage process, and you have to pass each stage before you can progress to the next one. So even if you were number one in terms of grading, in terms of the academic scores, when it comes to the UCAT, if you don't get what we need, then that's it. Your application gets rejected. So in some cases, actually the grades are less important than something else.
Okay. No, thank you for that. Because when I work with students, I don't want to say majority, but a lot of our students are applying to those direct programs in the UK. And whether it's direct med or law, it's it's something that we're always having that conversation on, how did you do on your score? Now, obviously not for the LMATs for law at Newcastle, but with the UCAT score, what is your score and are you going to be competitive at that school? Because you may need to reconsider where you're applying because you only get 4 choices with medicine, and that's something that students don't really understand going in.
And I often see, students listing their four med schools to me and thinking these are four very similar med schools in terms of the level of competitiveness. And if you're not getting into one, you're probably not going to get into any of them. So people do really need to think about giving themselves a good spread when it comes to applying to med schools. I think ultimately they're all good quality, no matter which med school you go into the UK. And once you've graduated, you're a doctor, so it probably doesn't matter so much where you went to med school. Maybe in the US it's a little bit different. People do like to display, their diploma on the wall, and they like to sort of talk about which med school they went to. But I think in countries like Canada and the UK, where we have national, public health systems, it's probably not something that anybody ever asks. Like, I don't think I could tell you where any of my doctors went to med school, and so it doesn't really matter once you've got that medical degree, then you're qualified as a doctor and you can go off and work. So I think it's important for students to do give themselves as much opportunity, because places, like Newcastle, we might not be the highest ranked, but for medicine, probably still less than say 10%, I think, of students who apply have a chance of getting an offer. So the 90% of students who apply are not. So it's important that people realize there is much more chance of them being in the 90% than there is in the 10%.
And thank you for that, those stats as well, because that's really helpful for students and parents to consider when they apply, especially for a really competitive program like medicine. How many international students would you actually accept in your program? Like, are the majority of the students that are going into direct med, are they from the UK, or like, do you only have so many international spots?
We only have 26 places for international students. That's a number that's set by the UK government. So we're allowed to take 7.5% of our cohort is allowed to be international. So in Newcastle, that works out to be about 25, 26 places per year. It's actually across the whole cohort. So if we were to over recruit one year, we'd have to slightly under recruit the next year, and balance it out across the 4 or 5 years. So which actually though still makes us one of the larger programs in the UK. I think there are some that are bigger. I think Imperial is now the biggest, but they have about 70 spots. But some institutions have 10, 12. So, at 27, 26, we're pretty sizable in terms of the number of international students that we can take. But, it's still very, very competitive. So that 10% or so, I would have to double check what that was last year. But I think when I have calculated in the past, it's around about that figure.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for that. So again, all you listeners, all you students and families that are considering, they do only have so many spots for international students, which even makes it more competitive. So you really need to do your research to make sure you have a spread of schools that you think that you will be competitive in the admissions. We're going to move on to student life if we can. How would you describe the student life at Newcastle, and what types of clubs or societies or extracurriculars are available to students to get involved in?
It's a very vibrant student life, and I think that the students who come because it is a vibrant city to study in, and a very popular city for students. So as I said, we have 28,000 students on campus, so it's a pretty decent number. We have around about 150 or so different societies, I believe. Most students will join at least one that's related to their program, so the engineering society or the modern languages society. And then they'll often, join another that is some more like a hobby-based society. Either there's something that they've never done before or something they've done prior to coming to university that they want to carry on with. And then we also have about 60 different sports clubs as well. Some of those are not as part of our performance sports program, and others we have the option of doing at a performance level depending on how good you are as a student athlete. For a lot of them, though, you can still represent the university, even if it's not, we don't deem it to be a performance sport. But if you are particularly good at that sport, you can still represent the university, which I think is really nice. So in the UK, there's something called BUCS, which is the British University and Colleges Sports. And every time somebody competes for their institution, they can collect points for their university, which then feeds into their overall ranking. So even if you're an ultimate frisbee player or you're a champion archer or you play polo, you can still contribute to your university's overall points, which is, I think, really nice. It's not just a case of these are our 3 or 4 top sports and we only care about the students who play those. We do have, more support for students who play in our performance sports, but even if you're not playing in one of those, you still can, be part of Team Newcastle, which is really nice. But if you've never played a sport in your life or you just want to play it for fun, there's still the option to do that. So we have the intramural sports as well, and there's chances, to start a sport from complete beginner, which I think is really nice for students. And then I think as students get to be a little bit more, familiar with the university and the city, I think a lot of them also do get involved in more community life outside of campus as well. So it's not just about, being part of the university and not engaging with the city. I think a lot of people then also look at what opportunities are available to them in the city itself and become part of the wider community. I remember reading a statistic, and I don't know if this is currently up to date or not, but Newcastle had, I think at the time, the city had the highest graduate retention rate outside of London in the UK. So more of our graduates choose to stay and live in the city than anywhere else apart from London. So even though, we're not one of the largest cities, we're not as big as Manchester or Glasgow or Leeds, students enjoy their time so much that they want to stay there. They don't want to leave afterwards.
Yeah, that's really interesting and incredible too. It just shows I guess, the community that is built within the school and the wider community as well. Now, when students move over there, are they going to be living in a residence or are they going to be getting an apartment in the city? How does that look for students when they arrive? And are there any traditions or events that students should expect when they uh, move into Newcastle?
So offer we have a guarantee for international students that they can live in our housing for their first year, as long as they meet a few certain conditions when they're applying and who they're choosing as their firm option, for example, on UCAS, or if they're a graduate student, that they accept our offer by a certain date. And most students take up that offer and do live in our accommodation for the first year. We own and operate the majority of our accommodation, and most of it is within, it's on campus or within a very short walk. And then we have a couple of agreements with some private providers where students would still be signing a contract through us, but they would be living in a building that was managed by a private company. And then after that, most students will tend to move out of the city into shared housing. So there's a couple of neighborhoods like Jesmond and Heaton that are very popular for students to live in. Those are out of the city centre, but not really far away. Jesmond's a bit closer than Heaton, and it's also slightly better served by the metro system that we have in Newcastle, but have a very different feel. They are much more, a neighborhood with its own feeling. They have their own bars and restaurants and supermarkets. They're still quite lively. They're not. I wouldn't say they were like suburbia, but they're not. They're not the busy city centre. And that tends to be that most students will then choose to live in one of those locations after their first year. There are also a lot of student accommodation options in the city itself that are managed by private companies. And so if students have very specific requirements, I must have a studio apartment, for example, or I want to be able to, choose my accommodation in January and get it all sorted before, I've even got my final grades or anything like that, then those kinds of students tend to opt for those options just because they are able to do that at any point, really. It's almost like, choosing a hotel room and booking it online and you're done. Whereas we often don't open up our accommodation till slightly later on in the process. In terms of traditions, there's none really. Although we are an institution that dates back to the 1800s, we actually only became an independent university in the 1960s. So we're relatively modern as well as having that history at the same time. We used to be part of Durham University, and so There's not many that I know of. I know there's some institutions where everyone, runs into the sea on a certain day or whatever. We don't have graduation caps. We don't wear a cap when we graduate. And the history behind that, there's a few different stories that I've heard. So I'm not entirely sure what the reason for that is, but that's definitely, one of the things that is slightly unusual is you don't have that graduation cap that you wear at your graduation ceremony. Instead, you have a colored hood that you wear over your arm. And then when you go up on stage, they put that over you and then that hangs around your shoulders and your back. And then that's what signifies that you're a graduate, as opposed to, having the hat with the tassel on that you change sides. But no, I can't think of any really. We have cows that live on some of the grass that surrounds the campus. So we've got where we're currently building a new accommodation site. We've just demolished one and they're replacing it with a new one. It sits on a piece of land that makes something called the town moor, which interestingly is actually larger than Central Park, the whole space. And on that grass, there's cows that live there during the warmer months of the year. And there's often a lot of talk that students try and get the cows to go in the accommodation and take them up in one of the elevators, but that's not a university condoned tradition. And also, I've never actually seen that happen. It's one of those myths that is surrounds as to whether or not it really did or didn't happen. But it's funny because I've met graduates who are older than me who said the same thing. When they were at university in the 1970s or 1960s, there was this talk of these cows being put in one of the lifts. So I'm dubious as to whether it's ever actually happened or if it happened one time and then that was it. The legend has persisted ever after that.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, whether it's a myth or not, that's
The
pretty
cows
neat.
themselves are pretty unique, I think. I think
Yeah,
students don't expect it because often they're not there when students have visited. They do get put away. I think unless they've come in for an open day, they probably haven't seen them and they're not on. So I think a lot of students get surprised when they first turn up to move into their accommodation in September and there's cows living outside their dorms. I just don't think they're expecting it from a university that otherwise is in a city centre.
for sure. Well, that moves me right into my next question really well. What do students or parents, what's misunderstood about Newcastle and what do they find most surprising once they arrive, other than seeing the cows on campus?
Um, I think if it's not a city that has a wide reaching reputation if you haven't necessarily done your research about it, so it's not super well known. In fact, the northeast of England is one of the least visited part of the country by in terms of tourism. So I think a lot of people, and I was a part of this group, and I don't live that far away from my hometown. It's only I think 200 miles away from where I'm from, but I didn't really know a lot about the city. And for me, Manchester was the big place that was kind of I was always used to growing up. And so I think a lot of people just don't really know a lot about the city, so they haven't really had a chance to form an opinion. So I think a lot of them are really surprised when they get here and how pretty it is, how nice the architecture is. The quayside, the riverside is really really nice as well. And the locals are known for being friendly. That's a reputation that I think a lot of people have about Geordies, is that they are friendly, and that's definitely something that is true. And I think a lot of people really like that. It is a busy city. It is quite international, but at the same time, it's a place where strangers will talk to each other still, and that's quite nice. I also don't think people expect us to have the metro system that we have. It's really great. It takes you out to the airport in 20 minutes. We can get it from the campus to the train station, and I think that does surprise a lot of people, particularly given the fact it does run underground at certain parts of within the city. I think a lot of people associate that just London having a network like that in the UK. And then I think also the proximity to the coast is what is a lot of students either don't know about or really appreciate when they do get here, that we are so close to the coast. Again, only 20 minutes away by metro and you're at the coast, and how nice the coast is up here as well. We are really lucky to have pretty much golden sandy beaches for most of the beaches that are around here, and they are not particularly busy. I mean, the ones that are closest to the city centre do get busy when it's a nice day, but even then they're not as busy as other parts of the country. I think talking to a colleague who's from down near Southampton, and she'd been to the beach recently when it was nice weather, and she was saying although it was busy, it's still nothing like where she's from back home, how busy it can get. And then all you need to do is head a little bit further north towards the border with Scotland, and even on a beautiful summer's day, you can still have plenty of space to yourself on the beach. You can kick a football around, or take a dog for a walk, and barely see any other people. And I think people are often pleasantly surprised about that, which is really nice.
Thank you for sharing that. For myself, living on Vancouver Island and being so close to the coast as well, that's something that I value, and truly appreciate. And I think for a lot of students and families, once they experience that, it really sets in terms of, how important that is for not only your experience, but relaxation and, well-being as well.
Yeah. I think probably similar to Victoria for me, like I didn't really know much about Victoria before the first time when I went. And then, I was blown away by how nice the city is, but also how much busier it was than I was expecting as well. So I think there's probably a similar kind of feeling when people come to Newcastle for the first time. They don't really know a lot about the place, and then they get there and they're like, oh, wow, this is so nice. Why hadn't I heard of it before?
Yeah, thank you. Now, for students and families that are considering applying or have applied, are there any scholarships or awards or financial aid opportunities for international students at Newcastle?
Yes, so we do have scholarships. They can change from year to year, although the current scheme that we have in place has been like that for the past 2 years now, or potentially even longer. So we have some automatic scholarships and we have competitive ones as well. They are based on nationality normally, so students would need to check, which one they may or may not qualify for. And then we are registered with the US Department of Education, so any US students can use federal aid, federal loans to help cover the cost, and then that also means they can use private loans and things like a 529 plan. And then for Canadians as well, I do know a number of Canadians use provincial loans that are available to them as well to help with the cost of programs. It is important to say that some programs are excluded from scholarships and loan options as well. So medicine being one of those. That is normally something where students would need to fund themselves either entirely from their own savings or would need to secure like a bank loan or something externally to the university. I think if they're American they can still use their private loans, but they can't use federal loans for something like medicine or dentistry though. But most other programs do qualify for those. We don't make financial aid packages. We don't put a package forward to a student like they might get if they're applying to an institution, particularly in the US. It's not the same, although we have maybe those automatic scholarships. That's mostly the only automatic thing that a student's going to get. If they are looking for a loan or if they are looking for one of the competitive scholarships, then they have to go through the application procedure in order to secure those. The majority of students are probably going to be paying what is advertised on the website, but it doesn't mean that there aren't scholarships there. There definitely are. Students just sort of need to be aware of them and also be aware what the conditions around those are, particularly if it comes to deadlines. Students with the UCAS system, and even if they apply after the equal consideration and deadline in January, we'll often find that most of our programs do stay open to applications right up until July, for example. But if you are looking for a scholarship, you're probably going to need to be applying much earlier in the year because the deadlines for those scholarships might be in February or March, for example.
Okay, thank you for that. If students have questions about Newcastle, how and who should they reach out to?
So we have a team who are based in the office in Newcastle, who are able to handle sort of general inquiries. And then if students are from a particular region, we also have like regional teams like the one that I work in and manage. So it would depend where they were listening to this podcast from. But if they're from Canada or the US or anywhere else in the Americas, actually, then that would be myself and my team. So there's myself, Lucy, who are based in Newcastle, and then we have a colleague, Kelsey, who's based in the US, who deal with inquiries from across the Americas. And then we have colleagues based around the world and a bigger team as well in Newcastle who deal with international students. But email addresses and things like that are available on the website. And even if they go through to the team who handle like our general inquiries, if they're unsure of what answer to give or they're not so sure of the question, then they'll pass it on to one of the regional specialists.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then my final question, is there anything that didn't come up during our conversation that you want to touch on or you wish I would have asked?
I think I've covered all the bases really. I mean, we've got some great videos on our YouTube channel particularly, but our social media has some lovely pictures and things like that to look on. I've not got anything to show you today what the campus actually looks like, so people might be wondering, trying to create an image of the university in their head. So I'd definitely say, go over to our social media channels and have a look at what the campus looks like, what the city looks like. And then if you want a bit more detailed information about our particular programs, then there are some good interviews with students and academics on our YouTube channel that give more information about the individual programs. But, I'm more than happy, or one of my team is more than happy to arrange a call with any students and spend time talking to them about the program that they're interested, what we're looking for in terms of applications, and give them a bit more of a personal sort of experience answer to whatever questions they may have, rather than just talking more generally about the university. If they're an expert athlete, we can talk about that. Or if they are particularly interested in one of our academic subjects, we can also arrange for them to speak with an academic directly as well. If anyone's able to visit, we're more than happy to show them around the campus as well. And we do have scheduled campus tours that are run, and they're not particularly focused on any grouping. So there'll be a mixture of UK international students, potentially undergraduate, postgraduate. If students are able to go on one of those, then they're more than welcome to. But if they would like to have one of the team show them around, then just let us know. And we're more than happy to spend time doing that. We appreciate if somebody's flown, 2, 3, 4,000 miles, however far it is to get to us. We can, we'll always make the time to show them around the campus, and also, try and arrange a meeting with somebody from the program that they're interested in as well.
Okay. Thomas, you've given so much great information and insight into Newcastle, and I really thank you for your time. And I hope to talk again soon.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for tuning in to Top Shelf EDU, your inside look at the university experience. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone exploring their path to higher education. We'll be back with more insights, stories, and advice to help you navigate your journey. See you next time.